my name is Palma Accardi, and you are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition and filmed live every Sunday night at the Irish Pub in Atlantic City.
And Palma joined by two meteorologists tonight, so my sympathies to Palma.
Yeah, I don't feel out of place or anything.
She knows as much as we do.
She does. As a co-anchor for what, year and a half now, right? Tidal Flooding Talk.
February 2018.
That's right. It's been a while.
Well, they don't tune in to see us anyway.
No, that's right. Unless there's like a Category 5 major hurricane,
Off of Florida.
and then the attention shifts from Palma to meteorologists for a couple of days, and that's the main focal point of tonight's show. So we're going to let you guys drive the discussion. Feel free to post your questions, comments. How's it going to hit Florida? How's it going to, if your backyard, what you want to know. I mean, we don't know everything yet, but we do know some stuff. This guy knows everything. Jim Eberwine is our guest tonight. I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon, and thanks for joining us on Tidal Flooding Talk. And Jim,
thank you, Dan.
Your visit couldn't be more timely.
Thanks for joining us, Jim.
When you have the second strongest landfalling hurricane ever in the Western Atlantic, and it coincides with your appearance on Tidal Flooding Talk. So thanks for being here.
So the pressure's on.
Yes. Absolutely.
Everybody's asking, what is it going to do?
It is. And whenever you have a hurricane on the East Coast, people start getting curious. When you have this type of just record-breaking hurricane, obviously interests and worries and concerns and information and misinformation goes up.
Well, a couple of days ago, all the track models had it going directly into Florida.
Right.
And that was the worst case scenario, and also it was Labor Day.
Right.
So you had people coming down to Florida thinking, well, I better not go to Florida, like our friends here. They were supposed to be down there. And all of a sudden, the thing started to turn out. But yet, it's turning out, but still hurricane warnings are going up on the east coast of Florida. So I always tell people, you're never really out of the woods until that storm is north of your latitude.
Yes.
And this thing is moving west. It's going over the Bahamas right now.
Right. It hasn't made the turn yet.
Nope.
I mean, until it does, Florida's on guard.
Florida's on guard. And it's just, a hurricane's like a big super tanker. They'll go across the ocean at a fast speed. They can't turn until they slow down. Now, you'll see Dorian starting to slow down and then make that turn. Hopefully it'll be in time where it doesn't do too much damage on the Florida coast.
Right.
Now, when is the soonest or the latest that we will know whether or not it's going to make that turn?
Well, when it happens. That's the unusual thing. The hurricane is just a small piece of the puzzle. All the upper atmosphere is controlling its track, like the high pressure. The Hurricane Center was talking about that upper ridge is forcing it to the south and making it go to the west. The ridge is eroding. Now, once it does that, then it'll start to slow down, and then it'll be caught up in something else called a trough, and that trough will start that northward track of it. So they don't know exactly, but they have a good idea it's going to happen.
So can you lay out and I've been talking about it live streams the past couple of days. I'd love your expertise on this. What's the worst case scenario? You're not going to get a storm plowing right into and across Florida.
Right.
But what is the worst case scenario for the east coast of Florida, and what is the best case scenario? Because those options are still on the table.
Well, what you have to look at is the intensity. Okay, you want a fast-moving storm and a quick-moving storm with an intensity of, say, 6 to 8 hours, or do you want a kind of not-so-strong storm like a Category 3 versus the 5 it is now for 20 hours? See, that's the dilemma they're in right now. If this thing slows down, it gets down to about 4 or 5 miles an hour, and then starts turning up the coast of Florida, this is a long-duration event. And when you see that, that kind of makes up for it coming in fast as a Category 5, say. So that's what they're looking at. Over in the Bahamas right now, they're looking at 24 hours of over 150 mile an hour wind. That's incredible.
And it's in the Bahamas. It's the northern Bahama Islands. So it's Grand Bahama and Freeport.
Right.
And then it's the Abaco Islands.
Abaco Islands. They have 17,000 people, and I'm sure they're all out of there.
They will hopefully be.
And the other Bahamas are 360,000 people. So you got a lot of people. And even though the Bahamas are not that high elevation-wise, I think 200 feet, something like that, it may be just enough to weaken the storm a little bit. And the last thing I saw on the Hurricane Center page was it's going to go through eye wall reconstruction. In other words, it may weaken a little bit,
yep.
And then the waters are very shallow for the most part, so it's going to use up all that heat, and maybe it starts to weaken because of that. So there's so many things that are still yet to happen to determine how it's going to affect the coast of Florida and then up through the North Carolina.
Now, which is more disastrous, a higher intensity storm or one that lasts longer?
Take your pick. Take your pick. A lot of people say, get it in, get it out. You get a real high storm surge, and it's over with. The winds are through in 6 to 8 hours tops. But if you extend this thing for 20 hours in one location, you're talking about serious surge and also very strong winds for over 20 hours over hurricane force winds. So it's a trade-off right now. So myself, I would like it to come in, get it done, get it over with. But that may not be the case for a good part of the eastern shore of Florida.
Now, for those of us with family, with friends in Florida, and many people in South Jersey fit into that description. Florida was really scared when the track was right into Florida.
Right.
Then the path shifted, and I don't want to say they totally let their guard down, but they said, all right, it's not going to be the worst case.
Right.
All right. But because we don't know when that turn's going to be, if it's going to come right to the coast, if it's going to be 20 miles off the coast, 100 miles off the coast, what do people that are right along the Florida coast do now? I mean, some have been issued mandatory evacuations. Others, maybe not yet, but they still could be in harm's way. So as the clock ticks down, and we all know South Jersey's hard to evacuate,
right.
Florida maybe not. You have more ways away from the shore, but you also have more people down there as well. So what is the mindset of people in Florida now?
If I was living down there, I wouldn't be within 30 miles of the coast. I would be inland, at least 30 miles. And what I would do is, if I have family down there, tell them to evacuate, because why take that chance? It's a margin of error that's not big. If you recall back in 1999, remember Floyd? Floyd was coming right into Florida coast, and the people remembered Andrew. So everybody evacuated, and then Floyd turned, went up the coast, and we got to 14 inches of rain. That was the largest peacetime evacuation up to that time. So now you're looking at something where they had a very bad scenario, then they kind of gave somewhat of an all clear, not totally, and now it's back to hurricane warnings being issued along the coast. So the people are probably thinking, what am I going to do?
Right.
But they got to listen to the media, they have to listen to the Hurricane Center, and they have to listen to emergency management down in Miami or along the Florida coast, which is very, very good, by the way.
Yep.
Their emergency management services in Florida are top notch.
Not as good as EPSECA's, but just under
Just
that.
a little bit.
Just a little under. Jim being the EPSECA emergency manager. So.
Now, this question applies for here, too, but why do people stay during mandatory evacuations? And is there any way that we could prevent people from doing that?
Some people don't have enough money to evacuate. We saw that in Gloria. People will not evacuate if their pets can't go, but we're starting to see more counties have pet shelters. So that problem is being addressed. People don't want to leave for fear of something happening to their property. So if you put all these things together and you tell the people you're going to have to evacuate, it's a mandatory evacuation. If they tell you no, there's really nothing you can do to force them to leave. But you have to explain to them, Palma, the biggest thing about an evacuation is not that their house will be destroyed or they're going to die. The fact is, if that house gets totally surrounded by floodwaters and the winds start picking up and it's getting dark, they're going to get nervous. If you have an elderly person in there getting chest pains, you call emergency management and say, I want somebody here, I need help. They're going to say, we can't get to you. We'll try, but every emergency manager, first responder I know would go out in 70-mile-an-hour winds, 80-mile-an-hour, but they're putting themselves at risk. Their instincts are to save people, and that's the idea.
All right, after Florida, it comes up the coast.
Yes.
Doesn't mean it the eye tracks over anywhere farther up the coast, or then again it does. But let's proceed to the Carolinas, and then let's do South Jersey. All right, so I mean, after Florida, whatever it does, comes the Carolinas.
Right.
What do we know and don't we know about the impact for those people who have family, friends, say, in North and South Carolina and Georgia?
It's basically the same thing. Georgia's been lucky for the most part. If you look at hurricanes that have struck the state of Georgia, very few because of the way that curve in the coastline is. But when you start up to South Carolina, and I was talking to people in Myrtle Beach today, and up into North Carolina, that eye, even though it stays 30, 40 miles off the coast, they're going to get hurricane force winds. Initially on the top side of the storm, they're going to get a storm surge. You got the Wilmington National Weather Service office. You got Morehead City. They'll probably be issuing hurricane warnings as the storm goes up the coast.
Yep.
Again, Dan, you know it's so uncertain, but the National Hurricane Center, they err on the side of safety.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. And I'll tell you, there was a song by the Beach Boys called something about a surfer, the only surfer in New York City. Remember that?
Don't know that one.
Nothing lonelier than a surfer living in New York City. The loneliest spot today is that one in front of the console at the National Hurricane Center, where that specialist is sitting down there looking at all this information, and now he knows when he hits that enter button and that bulletin, he's going to affect 50 million people.
Yep.
That's the loneliest position to be in today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Carolinas people, I mean, it's a couple days after, but they stay vigilant. They shouldn't be near the coast. They should pay close attention to forecasts, and they may or may not get a landfall. But the hurricane, we always say, is more than a point.
That's
you
right.
don't need a landfall to get hurricane force winds and storm surge and 15 inches of rain and all of that.
Max Mayfield educated us. He used to say, don't worry about that skinny black line.
Yeah.
And then you got that little teardrop cone of uncertainty. Along the coast of the Carolinas, it's going to be the same thing. And again, I would not take a chance.
And it won't
I
be a
would not
5
take
by that time. You know,
No.
But I mean, obviously,
We hope.
we hope. But 2, 3, 4 would still be hard.
Yeah, it's going to be a major hurricane, I think up to South Carolina, maybe something. And then it's going to be a hurricane category 2 or 1.
Right.
And then it'll continue on up the coast. It'll be a hurricane off our coast, but the question is how close it gets to us.
Right. All right, so Palma with the question that most of you guys probably have, and we're going to get to your questions probably right after this, and we'll follow up. So,
How is this going to impact us here on the Jersey Shore?
Well, as you know, we evacuate every Sunday. And
not this Sunday,
not
3-day
this
weekend.
Sunday. Yeah,
Tomorrow
that's
we
3-day
evacuate.
weekend.
Right,
Yeah,
later.
we evacuate. But we are so storm conscious here because I think sometimes, Dan, we have a 12 year season for nor'easters and hurricanes. As soon as the hurricane season is over, we're into the Northeast.
Yep.
We are I think we're getting very savvy here in the Northeast because of the people now showing the weather. You got good information coming out of TV. You got good information coming out of print media. And the National Hurricane Center, this is one of the interesting things about New Jersey. They've had 9 or 11 Hurricane Center directors, and 9 of them have walked our beaches. So they're very familiar with New Jersey. The effects that we may see here would be on the good side of the storm, with the eye staying over the waters.
So the good side meaning the least severe side.
Least severe,
right?
where
So
the-
the side you want to be on.
Yeah, where it wouldn't pile up the water,
Right.
but you could still get hurricane force gusts if it got a little bit close. And I think looking at the last information, there's something that you may see come up every once in a while called the CPA, which is the closest point of approach. Well, looking at the eye today, it looked like the closest point of approach would be about 215 miles southeast of us.
Right.
And then what you do there, and you know this all too well, you look at the radius of hurricane force winds and then tropical storm force winds. If they only extend out 150 miles from the center, we won't get those tropical storm force winds. But these are all things that are going to have to be calculated as the storm goes through this evolution process of maybe having a secondary eye form and then weakening over the Bahamas and then weakening as it comes up and makes the turn. And each one of those transitions could mean it's going to get weaker and go a little bit farther out to sea. Up north, say over the Great Lakes, we have this big wind that's coming down, the trough that's coming down. If it drops far enough south, it'll pick up whatever's left of Dorian and take it out to sea. Hopefully that happens a lot sooner than later.
So I've been telling people that because it had been a very popular question. I was at Wawa earlier. I was picking up pizza earlier, and that's the popular question. Like, all right, what's the worst case scenario? And for South Jersey, and we were talking off camera, it seems like 40, 50 mile an hour winds and
Right.
some rain.
Right.
Like a low end nor'easter,
Right.
where it's not nothing, but then again, it's probably not too destructive. And then the best case scenario would just be surf and rip currents with no rain and no significant wind.
And you
Would
will
those
have-
be the two extremes?
Absolutely, you're exactly right. But believe it or not, there's going to be people that are very disappointed if nothing happens. But I don't want to see anything happen from an emergency management standpoint. But yeah, you have to weigh all these things, and when a storm gets tucked under the coast south of Hatteras, that's kind of good for us because for two reasons. If it comes ashore, say in the Carolinas, it's going to weaken in 12 hours.
Irene.
Right.
Irene did that. It weakened. It wasn't as bad.
Right, and we had the evacuation for
Right.
Irene. But when it tucks up, it also shuts off the propagating waves, the heavy waves.
Right.
And if it comes off in North Carolina, we'll get a little bit of wave action, but not that much. Dangerous rip currents, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
But we will be on the good side of the storm.
Right.
I think looking at everything over the last couple of days, I would think, and I think you mentioned this earlier, Cape Canaveral up through South Carolina, up through Morehead City, and then out would probably be the worst stretch of the coast.
Yeah, so it's like Outer Banks to
Banks.
the East Central Florida coast. That's the area where evacuations may be. You know, with this type of track on a storm hundreds of miles off the Jersey coast, you can never say anything definitively,
Right.
but evacuations would not be likely here. Hurricane force winds would not be likely
Right.
here. It would be rainy and breezy, and worst case where it wouldn't be too good to be outside. But if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't necessarily know a hurricane was off the coast.
That's right. In fact, I can recall back in 2012, it was a month before Sandy came. You and I were in Ocean City talking, and everybody was saying the hurricane season's over. Remember?
Yep.
I remember you saying, "Well, we still got another month and a half or something like that." And here comes Sandy coming up the coast and made that customary track. So.
Right.
I guess no one knocked on wood after saying that.
Yeah.
We should if we say it this time, because we have officially 3 full months of hurricane season left as of today, right?
And you look out there in the Atlantic. There's a couple of more seedlings coming along.
There are.
They're following, but also with Dorian coming along and moving so slow, you're going to get some upwelling down there too. So you got this other one closely following, and that may be affected by the cooler waters.
Yep.
But it's going to be. I hate to see what the daylight's going to bring over the Bahamas. It's going
I've
to
seen
be,
some of the video.
It's going
already
to be
insane.
absolutely devastating.
I mean, people are kind of comparing it like a tornado, and they're different things.
And that was
in an
Andrew.
EF4, EF5 tornado, you have 200 plus mile per hour winds,
Right.
but over a block
Well,
or half a mile.
That was Andrew in
Right,
92.
right.
They-
This is over, a 20, 30 mile wide island or whatever.
Right, and Andrew was the worst one that hit Florida, and they said that was like a 30-mile diameter tornado coming right through.
Right.
And luckily it went south of Miami.
Yep.
And if you recall a few days ago, this storm was supposed to go directly into Miami, and I think it may still be the case, Dan, we still have not had a major city hit by a major hurricane.
Yep.
I think that's the case.
Yep.
So,
Now, is there anything in particular that makes this storm unique, or do you think it's possible to compare it to another storm that we've seen in the past?
well, yes. I guess 2016 we had Matthew, wasn't it?
We did.
Matthew was a storm of similar track and similar concern, but not as strong as this one. And it came up and it just went right up the Florida coast. And then
Miles
turned-
just off the coast.
Just miles off the coast. And I'm sure they're at the Hurricane Center, they're telling people, remember Matthew. However, Matthew is not anywhere near what Dorian is. Dorian, if those winds, if that eye shifts 20 miles to the west, you're going to have a strip of damage that goes all the way up the Florida coast from where it gets close to land.
Yeah.
And that'll continue, like I said, up into South Carolina and North Carolina.
And Matthew, even though it never made a landfall, caused billions of dollars worth of damage
rain.
and deaths.
25 inches of rain.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't need a landfall
Yeah.
to cause damage. So that's why people on the east coast of Florida should not let their guard down. And even though they're on the same good side of the storm we're going to be, they're on the good side of a Category 4 storm, which there is no good side,
Well,
right? I mean, it wouldn't be as bad as if they were on the other side, but it could still be devastating.
Well, I stay in contact with my buddy Joe Bastardi.
Yep.
And Joe always said, east side is the wind, west side is the rain. So even though you're saying, oh, I'm on the good side of this hurricane, you got so much rain that could fall to in excess of 10, 15 inches.
That's right.
Now, Dan, do we have any questions yet?
We
from
do.
our viewers?
Absolutely. Thank you. Steve Michaels, South Jersey is now officially in the cone. You look at the National Hurricane Center, we're on like the edge of the cone of uncertainty, meaning technically, the storm could track, into the cone. Now, we don't think it's going to track up up to Garden State Parkway, right?
Right.
But we are in the cone. What does that mean? And if Dorian makes it up the coast, will the impacts be like a strong nor'easter or a weak tropical storm here?
Well, the cone of uncertainty that he's talking about, what that is the error that the National Hurricane Center has seen over the years with their forecast. So the farther out in time you go, the more like balloon shaped that cone is and spreads out a little bit. What that means, what's his name, Steve?
Steve, yep.
Steve. What that means, Steve, is that although you have the official track, which is that skinny black line, as you get farther out in time, there's still a possibility that the hurricane could go over to the left side of that cone or to the right side of that cone. And that's a good thing to point out to a lot of people, because when you see something like that, you don't, like I said, you don't lower your guard until the storm is north of your latitude. Once it does that, then you're pretty much in good shape.
So we should, not to the severity of Florida people, South Jersey residents, visitors, since it's still vacation season, should still absolutely monitor forecasts. Because if a storm is 150 miles off our coast, it's different than it's 300 miles off our coast.
Absolutely.
But we don't expect it to necessarily be on our coast, at least at this point.
No, you'll see this satellite looks very ominous when it gets close to us. And by the way, if you've gotten on the satellite page, it's an absolutely gorgeous looking storm from a weatherman's standpoint.
Right.
But you get on that page and you can actually follow it. You go to weather.gov and then click on the state that you want to look at, and they got the satellite information available to you. But there's so much information out there, Dan, that it's very hard to think that somebody would not know that there's a hurricane out there, especially if you're traveling to Florida like the past few days. But the biggest concern with the Hurricane Center is always the time of year. What is the occupancy at these particular places on the coast? Should we put the warning out sooner? Should we wait a little bit? And so far, I think the Hurricane Center has been doing a good job. They didn't pull it too early when it looked like it was going to slam into Florida. They kind of waited a little bit, and I think over the Labor Day holiday, they put up watches 48 hours before they get into hurricane condition. So you may see this strip of hurricane warnings start to glow along the coast, north of Cape Canaveral, and then up through maybe Georgia, and then up into South Carolina.
All right, I got a question for both of you. All right, actually, I'm going to answer as well. Debbie Townsend is watching on Hatteras Island, which is in the very hurricane-vulnerable Outer Banks of North Carolina, Route 12, North Carolina Route 12, one way in, one way out of Dare County. We are watching and we'll make an evacuation decision soon. If you were Debbie, what would you be doing if you were on Hatteras Island right now?
Well, the name alone gives you a hint. Dare County. I wouldn't dare this hurricane to do anything. I'd be heading inland. Absolutely.
Absolutely. At least 30 miles.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you're going to be isolated. I went down to Morehead City and gave several presentations down there at the National Weather Service, and it is very, very desolate. If you don't make a move to get off those places very, very soon, it's going to be too late. Don't wait for the warning to go up. If they put up a hurricane watch, that's when I would do everything I had to do.
You don't want to be trapped.
No, you don't want to be trapped, Palma. Exactly. That's exactly right.
Right. Now, a lot of people are leaving this area here at the Jersey coast because, it's the end of summer now. A lot of people are leaving for the off season. What should people do before leaving, considering their homes? Their shore homes?
That's an excellent question, and we address that just about every year, regardless if there's a hurricane coming or not. But in this case, if the storm is coming up, and as Steve said, the cone of uncertainty is going to reach into New Jersey. I have a home down in South Jersey, and I live up in Philly. I would make sure when I left tomorrow, everything is secure. And what do you mean by that? If you have any furniture laying around outside, throw it in the pool if you have a pool. Make sure you have any neighbors who are there all year round. Keep an eye on your house, and just try to tighten it up, but not for a severe storm. Just for something that may be, like Dan was saying, a low grade to moderate nor'easter. And they're all used to that. Yeah.
Because it is that time of the year now after Labor Day where people just come down on the weekend. So it's all right, they'll leave tomorrow. And it's a great question you asked, Palma.
Yep.
They'll leave tomorrow. They may come down next Saturday. But if there were to be impacts from Dorian here, it most likely be centered on Thursday night and Friday based at this point, and your furniture could be gone. And not that it's going to be a destructive storm,
Right.
but you wouldn't necessarily expect 40-mile-an-hour winds on a Friday in September.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah.
so it's
Better
very good
safe than
advice.
sorry.
Absolutely.
Always better safe than sorry. And again, the National Hurricane Center upgraded their forecast August 8th, right? And they said there's going to be more hurricanes than the earlier forecast back in May. But the people are not going to remember that forecast. All they're going to remember from this point forward is Dorian.
Yep.
Dorian. Now, Dorian's got 180-mile-an-hour winds.
185, I think.
185.
Yeah,
185.
Yep.
The strongest we've ever had was 190. I think that was Allen. But the world record, believe it or not, the world record is a storm back in 2015 called Patricia. It went into the west coast of Florida, Mexico,
Yep.
215 miles an hour. Not that we want to break any records.
No.
We don't
Not
want to
in
get it
this
any
way.
higher than this. No, not in this respect.
And it's true, too. You got 185, but number one, the storm is interacting with islands.
Yes.
Granted, not islands with tons of mountains on them that would normally weaken hurricanes, but number one, it's interacting with islands. And number two, it's going to sit over the same water and stir up that water. So you have to surmise, and the Hurricane Center is on top of this, that it's probably reached its peak
Yes.
and will probably start to weaken.
Well, that's a good point, because if you look at the waters around the Bahamas, they're aqua blue. But that means they're not very deep. They're about 9 feet deep. But there's one spot called the open ocean, which is 2,000 meters deep. But that's a very small area, the Bahamas. That Bahamas actually act as a break for the Florida coast in many respects, from the easterly trade winds and also the rip current there. You have winds coming across the tropical Atlantic. They run into the Bahamas, and you can see how the waves will reflect around it and break up and dampen a little bit. So in this respect, the Bahamas, on a small scale, may save a good part of the east coast of Florida, hopefully, and then get the storm maybe slowing down and then moving away and then trying to track to the north at that 3-4 miles an hour. But what you're going to give up in intensity, you're going to make up in duration. In some places, that duration of the storm could be devastating.
All right, Elmer Tate, we'll bring it back to the title of the show, which is Tidal Flooding Talk. Everyone from Stone Harbor, or he says hi from Stone Harbor. Question is, storm heads into the Carolinas, off the coast, stays off the coast. Are we gonna have northeast winds for a period of time with the king tides and persistent onshore flow? Can we expect tidal flooding from the storm? Would that be a concern, or would it be more rain and wind?
That term, king tides, that's a relatively new term. We've had our tides getting up to the roadways for the past 10 days, if you recall.
Right.
And with this storm, like I said, when it tucks under the Carolinas like that, the waves kind of propagate and stop there. It can't go around the Carolinas and come up to us. But what you will see, it'll once it gets out of the Carolinas, if we pick up any northeast to east component, yeah, absolutely. Our waters are still high in the back bay. You'll still see the potential threat of minor tidal flooding.
So minor would be the range.
Yeah, minor
it
would be the
wouldn't be a
range.
moderate or major flooding event.
No.
Based on this track and what we think right now.
Yeah, and the reason is we're talking about it slowing down, approaching Florida. When it gets to our latitude, it's going to be accelerating because instead of now the ridge forcing it this way, upper level trough is bringing westerly winds. That's why we've been cool the last week. It's going to take that storm and it's going to accelerate to the northeast.
All right, Sue Patterson Robbins says coastal South Carolina evacuation just ordered by the governor. So
Good
probably
call.
good advice.
Absolutely.
I don't know how to what extent, whole coast or just parts, but good call. And again, we don't expect evacuations up here. So let's run down just as a recap here as we wind down. Run down our South Jersey, impacts, timing, and what we can see.
Late Thursday into Friday,
All right.
getting up to maybe medium strength tropical storm force winds, and that would be 40, 45 miles an hour. There may be something in our buoys near shore gusting to near hurricane force, but briefly.
Yeah.
Tidal flooding would be at a minimal impact.
Okay.
And rain being on the west side, everything is going to come down to the Barrier Islands.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
So if you're in Hamilton or you're in Millville or if you absolutely are in Philadelphia, you're probably not going to get much.
Yeah,
Right?
if I had to draw a line, Dan, in Palma, I would say Ocean County South, primarily the Barrier Islands.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to tell our viewers before we close the show?
Well, again, Tom had mentioned to me before about getting on a particular website. Make sure, if you go to weather.gov, it'll show you a big picture of the U.S., and you can click on that particular state that you're interested in. If you have friends in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Jersey, and it'll show you the specific weather right for here. Or go to the National Hurricane Center and look at the latest information. The graphics that they have on there are tremendous. And if you are able to get on what I think is the best website to come along in the last 10 years, is that those 16 and 17 satellite shots. It's like you're standing right over the storm looking at it. And you can read the bulletins coming out of the National Hurricane Center, and you can actually see every little detail that they're talking about. How the storm is moving, where it's going to turn, when it makes that turn.
Which website is this?
It's satellite. The best way to access it is to go to weather.gov, click on New Jersey. Right under the picture of New Jersey, you'll see the Earth. That's a satellite, and you click on that, and you can get detailed. That's incredible, absolutely. And you get a visual shot. It's getting dark now. You'll be getting infrared shots for intensity. And Dan, you have any websites that you want to? Tropical Tidbits.
Tropical Tidbits is an interesting site for computer models.
Yes.
You want to see what the computer models are doing, and it does a lot of traffic on it right now, so it's running a little slower than normal. But that's a very good website. Bill McCord from Summers Point Emergency Management says great information, Jim, and he's
Hello,
your
Bill. How are
colleague,
you?
so he's watching as well. And this is a good point too. Angelo Quintana, who watches the show on occasion, a little bit of a weather knowledgeable Floridian, actually.
Get his number, we'll call him.
Angelo actually says, he thinks, there's a decent chance of this coming close to the Florida coast. Thinks it needs to be talked about more because Floridians have really relaxed way too much down here. And do you think that's an issue where, all right, it's making a direct hit. All right, it's going to turn. It can still get to the coast. So we talked about it earlier. So Floridians, by no means, like you said, until it gets north of you, you have to prepare for the worst.
Absolutely.
And you hope it makes that turn.
Again, you're looking at a tiny margin of error. And I'm telling you, that guy sitting at that console getting ready to hit that 8 o'clock bulletin, he is really, really looking at everything he can possibly look at to ensure the people that, yes, this still is going to get a little bit closer, and then, yes, it could start that turn, but he doesn't know. He doesn't know. Mother Nature bats last, always bats last. So you've got to watch these things. And if I was in Florida, like I said, anywhere near the coast, especially north of Miami, I'd be inland.
And especially on a barrier island. I mean, you should not be on a barrier island right now. In Florida, say, maybe not Miami, because the storm is going to be north of you,
right.
But anyone north of whatever, West Palm Beach or Jupiter River or wherever, if you're under a hurricane warning, you should absolutely be off barrier island.
And Tom mentioned websites. No matter where you are, each county has an emergency management coordinator. Get on the website and Google your emergency management office for your particular county. They'll have all the site-specific information on there about evacuations, whether it's mandatory, whether it's voluntary, and they mirror what's on the National Hurricane Center page. And the Hurricane Center, I guarantee, has been in contact with everyone in Florida, as well as everybody up through the Carolinas right now. But on a good note, we had Sandy, and our infrastructure was not really ready for a Sandy. Down there, and it's unfortunate in one respect, they get a lot of storms in the Carolinas and it's also in Florida. Those people, I won't say they're used to it or really experts at what they do, but they have pretty good operating plans ready to go, and they know when to pull the plug for evacuations, when to really get serious about these storms. So if you're thinking about people down there, your loved ones in Florida, they're in good hands in that respect because they've been through this so many times. I think they got it down almost to a science, and hopefully you'll see minimal loss of life, if any.
And then someone else, and I actually, this is where I'm going 1 month from now, and I have a lot of friends and some family down on the west coast of Florida.
Yes.
So let's say you're in Tampa, Sarasota, Naples, Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Port Charlotte. they had the scare from Irma a couple of years ago. What should West Coast of Florida residents be doing, if anything? Are they in the clear? Are they, should they be concerned at all?
And I would count my blessings for one, because initially it was going all the way to the West Coast. What I would do is continue to be very vigilant. Look at the information, even though it's not directly going to affect you as much as the East Coast. Look at the information coming out of the Hurricane Center. Look at the information coming out of Monroe County, which is down in Naples, and then Tampa, St. Pete. That's a very crucial area. That's one of the most difficult places to evacuate if you've been down there in Pinellas County. It's very, very difficult. But again, those people are seasoned. The first responders, emergency management, they're seasoned veterans. They've been through this. But if you're a resident down there, you can relax a little bit, but not totally. But you'll start to see those hurricane warnings starting to be issued, and they may get through maybe halfway across the Everglades. You never know. They may not get as far as Lake Okeechobee, but they're going to get pretty far inland compared to what it was yesterday. And then you'll see this all the way up the coast. And I think, getting back to the National Hurricane Center forecaster, they err on the side of safety, especially when you have a big, big holiday like Labor Day. Absolutely. They don't want to see any fatalities. They don't want to see any damage. They want this thing to do what they're forecasting it to do.
That's right.
I think I'll definitely have to call my grandfather, who's in West Palm Beach, after the show.
Yes.
Give him a good stern talking to.
Yeah. If he lives by himself and the call goes out for evacuation, I would certainly go. Absolutely. And the older you get, you're reluctant to do anything.
Well, it's what you were saying before. It's almost like he's used to it because, he's been there so long.
Yeah.
He's weathered so many storms.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Do you think it was interesting, because it's a very common theme on our show. Human nature is to treat the next storm like the last storm. So we had Irene, we got prepared, we evacuated, it wasn't bad. We got Sandy, everyone, some people didn't evacuate because of Irene. Is there going to be any impact from this storm in Florida, let's say? Because, Florida is right, like dead center, landfall across the state, to nothing, to, everyone, like Angelo suggests, not saying, oh wow, we're not going to get hit, but saying, all right, we dodged a bullet before the bullet was even fired, and now here it comes, and worst case scenario, you have a storm brushing right up the coast, either like onshore, just a landfall, or just offshore, just missing landfall. Can you see any lessons being taught by this storm before it even strikes?
We saw that back in Matthew when it was supposed to go into Florida, and it didn't. We heard the people say, no big deal, no big deal. In a way, and I'm very careful when I say something like this. In a way, you would want to see damage at the coast, but no loss of life, because that way the people will actually see that, yes, this was a serious storm. If this storm comes in, as powerful as it is, as much, it's a celebrity at this point. If it comes in and nothing happens, people are not going to believe the next time when they see a Category 2. They'll say this is a 5, and it did nothing. Now we got a 2, and you're telling me, yeah, you're absolutely right. And to take that one step farther, when we had Katrina go into New Orleans, we had that followed up by Rita. Remember Rita?
Yep.
Everybody heard about the evacuations in Katrina, and nobody left. But now here comes Rita. Everybody left, and they went up 45 going into Houston. There were more people that died in the evacuation than what they did from the storm.
Yep.
And then when Harvey came along a couple of years ago, the mayor of Houston said, because of what happened with Rita, we're not evacuating, even though we're going to get 60 inches of rain. So you're absolutely right. The sociologists are on top of this all the time. They have to figure out, and we were talking about this before. You got the media, which puts out the information. You got the Hurricane Center, National Weather Service, emergency management. The part of the puzzle that's not complete and is not cohesive yet is the general public, because they perceive things a little bit differently. If they escape this time from a Category 5, what will be the next time when you have a Category 2 coming in? They're going to say, just like we did with Sandy.
Yep.
Nothing happened in Irene. And the other thing in Irene, we told people to leave the coast and we sent them into 15 inches of rain.
Right.
And they said, "What did you do that for?" Yeah. So now you had Sandy come along, and they said, "I'm not going anywhere." But the thing about Sandy, and we talked about this, if you had taken Sandy instead of October 29th and moved it up to when Irene came, you would have had a different story.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it was the dead of summer. And if you had Irene back in when Sandy happened, nobody would have backed with it.
Right.
Nobody.
Right. All right. Well, we've been watching Tidal Flooding Talk, and this is a show focused specifically on Dorian. I've been talking about Florida, its potential impacts, the Carolinas, Georgia. A lot of questions, but despite the uncertainty, there's definitive actions people should be taking.
Absolutely.
And no definitive actions here except what Palma asked you of.
Right.
You know, put your lawn furniture away before you leave, just in case it's breezy and rainy on Friday.
Right.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for all of the information.
You're quite welcome.
And I know you already know it's coming, but an Irish Pub t-shirt. It's actually a long sleeve tee this time.
Jim's going to have a collection of every shirt in the gift shop, actually, eventually.
Thank you.
Well, thank you,
Thank you
Jim.
very much.
Jim Eberwine,
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank
hurricane expert, and Jim's retired, so you'll be seeing him speaking at conferences all up and down the East Coast, teaching at ACIT, on Tidal Flooding Talk, and doing everything a retired person would do, right? How often are you actually home?
I haven't been home for 3 months.
Yeah, that's about right.
It's good to see you back home down here.
Yes.
It's really good to see you back here.
All right, we'll be back next Sunday. Next Sunday's guest, if you're on the spot, is Assemblyman Vince Mazzio.
Okay.
All right, I was blanking.
I knew he
and,
was
yeah.
coming up, but I didn't know it was this Sunday.
So Vince Mazzio will be our guest next Sunday, and we'll probably have a little recap on Dorian as well. Hopefully, it's just rip currents and surf here.
Yep.
That's a possibility. There's a possibility we won't get any wind and rain from it. There's also the possibility we get a low end nor'easter like we've been talking about, where but evacuations, no, most likely not. No hurricane landfalls. It's not going to be a Sandy plowing into the coast. It's going to be something off the coast, 100, 200, 300 miles.
And you watch how fast it accelerates
Right.
once it gets up to the Carolinas.
Right.
It's going to be like a rocket shot.
Yep. Yeah, once it gets picked up. All right, we'll see you back here next Sunday night. Thanks for stopping by, guys.
Good night.
Thanks.